Okay, so yeah, don't have sufficient numbers to make quorum. We have 4 members, I think, present, 2 in person, 2 online. So we can start talking and reviewing information, in accordance with our agenda that we've got. Okay, so Carmela, okay, so thanks for joining us, Carmela. So we do have 5 members then. So I'll kick things off with a land acknowledgement. A land acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes and respects Indigenous peoples and the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and the land. I'd like to acknowledge that we live and work on the unceded land of the Dena'ina people and thank them for their past, present, and future stewardship of the land in which we live. Also wanted to always make the note at the beginning that the Teams chat is not part of the official record. So if you type something in the chat, please speak it into the record so we have a complete record of the meeting. We could probably skip over a roll call and move on to probably skip over our approval of agenda unless anybody objects to the way we're going to structure things in this non-formal meeting. I do not have a chair report to offer at this time. I am, I guess one comment I'd make is that I think in our last meeting, I was very happy that we achieved quorum, and I was very happy that we had a lot of good discussion going. So I really hope to see the BAC, continue to have a voice and to meet and to function as a viable body. That's really been something important. I think we have lost a lot of steam over the last several months. I'm really hoping that we can regain that, especially when we're talking about, really important subject right now with the annual budget cycle. So that's my hope. But otherwise, we do have Assemblymember Zaletel here, who is going to share an assembly report, also has a resolution to share with us.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. So first, I just want to put some dates on your calendars. The budget work sessions right now are scheduled for October 13th and October 27th. That's when we do the review of the operating, capital, enterprise, and utilities budgets. We're taking a break on 10/20 because AFN is in town. And then we have a little bit of a gap after the 27th. The Housing Summit is scheduled for the 3rd of November. And then budget amendments, I believe, will be discussed on the 17th of November. So just for your planning purposes, that's what it's set at right now. Of course, if those get updated, we can let you know. We have already been thinking pretty extensively about the budget. We recently passed an ordinance that requires a little more detail, actually a lot more detail for the capital improvement program and the capital improvement budget up front. We really run into a crunch if we want to add or change the capital projects once we get fully into the budget process, because there's work for bond counsel to do associated with a lot of those. So we really appreciated in the 120-day memorandum that there was that pretty extensive list, and we've already started to think about those and review them on our own district priorities, because what members often do when we get the capital budget is we flip through it and we look for like the projects we know that are on the top of mind for your district. Oh, wait, is that road project still on track or whatever it might be? So now we're getting a bit of a preview. The list provided certainly doesn't hold the administration to that for purposes of actually publishing the budget, but it does give us that preview. Just like the 120-day letter, that is a great preview into where the administration might be going. So this year, what we decided, Co-Chair Brawley and I for Budget and Finance, in consultation with the chair, Chris Constant, is to put together a resolution kind of talking about our budget priorities. In the past, it's sometimes been a letter from leadership to the administration, but with this new makeup of the assembly, we thought a resolution would be a great way to do that. So what we did is this resolution you have before you was passed last Tuesday. I guess that was just this week. It feels like it was 2 days. I know, just 2 days ago. And what we were able to do, and it's been really nice, having that CIP conversation a little bit earlier, then having a work session on the 120-day memo really let us kind of know where members were already going with budget priorities and where we had consensus. So then to get it down in writing really sets basically like a mapping tool for our budget process. And so what you'll see there is I don't think many of these will be terribly surprising. That we would like to see a continuation budget for next year. Our priorities are really around winter maintenance. I don't think anyone wants the flurry of emails like we got last year, but we really want to make sure we're talking about multimodal transportation in that winter maintenance and transit locations and sidewalks. Public safety and emergency services, we continue to be really concerned with the vacancy rate in the police department. And the call volume coming in, particularly to the fire department. So we want to make sure those are remain adequate services and that there aren't delays, particularly from public safety front. Similarly, that we are appending to those other public safety services like the mobile intervention team and the mobile crisis team. Fiscal responsibility, it's always a core value when you're in government. D there, section 1, 2D, the recruitment and retention of employees. This is one that I would say for internal priorities is probably the highest one of the body right now. Like external, it's housing, I think, and internal, it's really workforce and workforce development. And we want to go beyond just recruitment, but we're really talking about retention as well. What professional development opportunities can we offer? How can we make sure we're competitive with the private sector? Because what we've seen with the turnover in the municipality and the vacancy rates is this loss of institutional knowledge. And while we've patched some of it together using contractors, we don't keep that knowledge with us, and that's a real loss, and it's also very expensive. High levels of service across all departments and public access to assembly meetings through streaming, broadcasting, or other means. That might feel a little cryptic, but if you have ever been in chambers, you realize it's a little dated. The comm system is just as dated, or the broadcast system, and we know that that really does need to be addressed. And so and people have come to rely on that live stream, that YouTube or cable channel. So we really want to make sure we're getting out in front of that. And then policy choices for general government shouldn't apply to enterprise and utilities budgets, which are self-sustaining. They have to bring in the revenue that they're going to spend, and then a lot of them intersect with the regulatory commission to set rates in order to, or tariff through the Port Commission. So there are these other processes that really set the policies and the trends for their budgets. For the alcohol tax, really wanting to look at balancing the various dedications so that there's some equality or equity among them either way, because we've seen disproportionate spending on homelessness out of the alcohol tax to the detriment of prevention in particular. Appropriately bond for capital improvement projects. This one in particular is we tried to ask the state for a lot of capital money last year and we didn't get it for the most part. And so those capital projects where we asked the state and didn't get it, a lot of them are still on the state requests. And each time we ask the state and we don't get it, that project gets pushed another year, another year, another year. And what we end up running up against is either more expensive projects in the future or the potential for catastrophic failure, like a sinkhole at Burkaw and DeBar. This next one is the revenue earned by the fire department, supplemental emergency transport, emergency medical transport, and ambulance fees. We'd really like to see those stay in the fire department and not be used as a revenue offset for general government contributions. Because when ambulance fees and SCMT dollars go up, it often means we've had overtime and there's more wear and tear on the vehicles. Additionally, the fire department has some interesting needs that are sometimes harder to bond for that could be taken care of with this. And we know personnel-wise that they are really trying to build out their personnel. So we really want to let them strategically use that funding. It's not that different from the fines and fees the police department has. They have some flexibility in how they use that funding. And then lastly, We still don't have 2022 year-end closeout, so we're hoping to see what those numbers look like as we proceed into 24. Particularly if there's any fund balance or if there's any issues we need to take care of from 22, we want to just wrap that into the budget process at this point. So we can be as strategic as possible. So that's where we're hoping to head. And we will see when the budget drops, if that's where the administration also wants to head, but we did get it out, we hope, in enough time so that they have some time to consider where we're at with it. So, and then our next budget and finance committee meeting of the whole next week, we're going to talk a lot about the 120-day memo. They're going to kind of shift the agenda around. My co-chair, Ms. Brawley, will be chairing that.
And the 120-day memo is out. It's been released.
Yeah, it's been around since the 15th. Oh, sorry, the first. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know why I thought the 15th. 15th is tomorrow. First. Yeah.
And I'll put that link as well in the chat. It's on the OMB website, and I believe it is on Assembly's website as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Good. Thank you. So it's a continuation budget with some specifics behind it.
And we think some of those specifics already exist in the last budget, or maybe would hopefully be guidance not to cut like vacancies in the interest of bringing the cost of the budget down, that we really want to see the workforce redeveloped. We don't want to,
Right.
have less workforce.
And I have watched that and happen in state government where the vacant positions get cut, but the fact that they're vacant doesn't mean that they're less important to daily functioning. It's often some other sense. So yeah, it's not a good thing.
Yeah, I would say, the recruitment and retention really goes with E, which is maintaining that high level of service. They're really quite related.
Folks have questions for Meg about Assembly?
Oh, I have one more update. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Member Brawley and I are going to be submitting an item in the next regular agenda to take the $2 million that was prevention alcohol tax one-time funding. HD wasn't really getting it out the door, even though it's been appropriated since April. So we are going to recommend, a small grant to the native village of Eklutna to do culturally appropriate after-school programming as part of prevention. They have something they'd really like to stand up and pilot, and so I think it's $25,000. The other is to take the remainder of that $2 million to the Alaska Children's Trust and have them push it out into the community. They have this mechanism. They know the potential grantees. And that's not typical for us. We usually like to make those decisions about kind of who is receiving our funding. However, it's an interesting opportunity because I'll be really interested to see who they reach as potential grantees that maybe we aren't reaching through our process. And so I look at it as a great pilot. It's a great data opportunity to see what kinds of requests they receive versus what kind of requests the health department receives when they push out that prevention funding. And we can hopefully take that to make a better process moving forward on prevention funding.
Excellent.
So that'll be a public hearing item and can't be approved till October, but we wanted to get it moving.
Sure. Yeah, they're a great organization for doing that kind of thing. They fund a lot of worthwhile efforts, so they have a good system and process for that. Questions for Ed? Anybody online? One little question I have, the 5-year CPI for inflation, is that how is it the 5-year CPI that goes into the tax cap calculations based on the 5-year?
Yes.
Because that is a rough thing to deal with right now when you have, recent surge of inflation and then the personnel costs not necessarily able to keep up with it. It's certainly a big issue, I imagine.
We can't wait to see how it was calculated. So I have a feeling that'll be part of the budget committee meeting. They're going to want to ask some questions about that.
Yeah, I think Desiree sent over some questions.
Oh, great.
The work
Good.
session, yeah. So we'll be getting some answers for those.
Members had until the end of the week to get all their questions together about 120, just so that we can.
Okay, she sent them yesterday.
Oh, great. Okay, good.
I'm hoping that's all, because that's what we're prepared for. So,
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Sure. Yeah, I know it seems like a little technical thing, but it's actually could have big impacts.
Yeah, as it is right now, the population reduction, so people don't realize, but the population reduction that year over year, so that was about $1 million out of the tax cap. And just that small shift in the CPI was actually, on top of that, and that starts to move the tax cap down fairly significantly.
Anything else that's for? Okay. Thank you very
Yeah,
much. We
all right.
appreciate your.
Yeah, no problem. I'm gonna go get ready for the rules committee. Thanks so much.
Then I think we can move on to Anchorage School District, and I think we have Ms. Parrott here as well as Ms. Lessons from the school. So I will hand it over to the two of you to give us the.
Great. Well, I don't know that can you all hear me okay online?
Yes, we can. Yes,
Okay.
sound loud and clear.
Coordinated, but maybe I'll start first and then Katie can give you the real hard data as follow-up. So I wanted to say that we're now in FY24. School's been in session for 4 full weeks now for grades 1 through 12, 3 weeks as of today for our kindergartners, and lots of great things are happening. Transportation is fully staffed now that we've adjusted really what were 2015 wages for a 2023 economy. Student sports are off to a great start, our extracurricular activities. ASD is rolling out our new grades K through 3 English language arts curriculum to align with the Alaska Reads Act, and our PLC Mondays, which is this 1-hour delayed start for professional learning communities for teachers to really hone their craft and dive into student data. And I think that collectively ASD is making meaningful progress in really aligning our resources in support of our board goals for reading, math, and college career life readiness. And I'll also say that I've been checking and our student attendance is off to a better start than each of the last 2 years. But I wanted to take this opportunity to remind this group that ASD has relied on federal relief funds and spending down our fund balance to keep class sizes as low as possible for a number of years. Last year, if you'll remember, we allocated about $56 million in federal funds to prevent a pupil to teacher ratio increase of 10 to each of our grades. This year, using our remaining federal funds, we're allocating almost $20 million to offset what would otherwise be an increase to our pupil teacher ratio of 2.75, and yet we still let 60 something positions go as part of an increase to that pupil teacher ratio. So we're seeing larger class sizes is my point, because that's how we had to balance our budget, and static funding from the state has really left us with very few options. That said, ASD is receiving a 0.5% increase to the BSA this year. At about $30 per student, that will net ASD approximately $2.2 million. I'll say that the implementation for the Alaska Reads Act alone does exceed that overall figure. So the math is really not in our favor there. And again, as I've said before here, we're talking about a pretty massive structural deficit for FY25, which we will be discussing as we get closer to February. And hundreds of jobs are ultimately on the line. That said, I wanted to focus on and give a brief update on how the board did allocate the one-time funds we have received from the state. And again, this is what remained from the legislature's appropriation after the governor vetoed half. We recently approved what is essentially Appendix H in our budget for this coming year. It spends about half of $24.9 million and saves the rest for FY25 to help bring that structural deficit down. So we essentially are putting $10.2 million to work in our brick and mortar schools. The charter schools receive about just over $2 million. And the expenditures from those one-time funds include just over $5 million in contract-related changes to salaries and benefits, which is really necessary given the tight labor market we're in. We're spending about $2.8 million this year in support of that Alaska Reads Act implementation. So this included like $800,000 to pay for teachers K through 3 to return a few days early this August. Another $756,000 to purchase the curriculum for grades 4 through 5, which will be rolled out next year. So that will allow grades K through 5 to have a seamless experience. Again, within this overall $10.2 million, there's about $1.4 million going to increase pay for substitute teachers. Again, dealing with labor shortages. We're paying for a small addenda for a staff leader at each school to really lead that PLC work, right, to cover the extra workload. We paid for principals to return a little bit earlier this fall. And, little things like middle school debate, we're funding that. So really focusing on the K-3 English language arts work in support of the Alaska Reads Act. I wanted to just take this minute to share that the implementation involves significant work for our staff. It's got a lot of potential, but our staff is going to be working really quite hard. So I just thought I'd share the calendar. So right now, students in grades 3 through 5 are being screened for their level of proficiency. And this is involving testing teams. So we're pulling staff out from other positions, for example, the IGNITE program, to allow for standardization in these testing teams. Previously, we had instructional coaches take the lead in that, but we didn't have that in the budget. So now we've cobbled together these testing teams so we can ensure standard screening practices and procedures. So this first round of screening will lead to parent notification later this month if a student in grades K through 3 is below or well below proficient. It will then require individual learning plans to be made by teachers for each student. Implementation of these plans with different degrees of intervention, depending on student need, takes place October through December with progress monitoring every 2 weeks. A second round of screening takes place in December, again, pulling staff out of their other positions to ensure standardization. That will lead to follow-up interventions January through February. February is when we have parent-teacher conferences where teachers will initiate a discussion with parents about the possibility of non-progression as needed. Their interventions with their students will continue February through May. And then there'll be a third round of screening April and May, again with these testing teams. And that will lead to a parent being empowered to decide to progress their student or not. And then students in third grade who are below proficient, whose parents allow them to move on, it's my understanding that they will then be provided with something like 20 hours of summer learning. And I don't really know who pays for that, but I'm assuming that it's ASD somehow, somewhere. So that is a significant workload that we're asking our teachers to take up. So I just, I know that there's a focus around the community and across the state on reading, and that's how we're going to be doing it in ASD. Just 2 more things, and then I'll pause. We are going to be having a year-long conversation with our community about ASD's footprint and effective delivery of our educational services. So community members can expect surveys this fall, I think starting around October. Then we will have follow-up town halls this winter that will lead to the creation of a rubric that the administration will use and which the board would approve in the spring. So the administration would use that rubric that's created through community input to make recommendations next fall to recommend school consolidations and closure plans, I believe for FY26 and beyond. So kind of a year-long conversation about ASD's footprint to ensure optimal educational delivery. And then finally, ASD and the Assembly have a joint board meeting tomorrow. And items of financial interest include a conversation about the maximum local contribution for education funding, some sort of a discussion about our shared pool history and agreement, and an item that says early child care bond. So I'm hoping that another ASD team member can update this group at the next meeting in October, since I will actually be at an all-day community meeting regarding our college career life readiness goal on October 12th. So I'll pause there.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Lessons. Any questions before we move on to Ms. Parrott's portion? There's a lot to take in there. The school district
Yeah.
update. When I think I've heard all of it, there's always more as far as what the impact of the flat BSA funding has been. So it's tough as a person, with kids coming into the school system. It's not easy to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's an ongoing conversation, and I'm eager for that legislative session to gavel in so we can maybe work on problem solving and making some headway.
Thank you. More to add?
Ms. Lessons did a very good job of covering many of the important bases for ASD, but I think a couple of things that I could add are specific to some of the specific information that will be provided tomorrow for the joint committee related to the structural deficit and what we're looking in terms of figures moving forward into future budget seasons. So as has been previously discussed, ASD has a structural deficit of around 95 million, which is not a small number. And that's the difference essentially between our projected operating fund budget and the projected revenue that we expect to receive from the state. There is an estimated $30 million available in fund balance that we plan to be able to have available to balance the budget. However, I think it's really important for this committee and the community to understand that the reason that $30 million isn't a bigger number or doesn't need to be a bigger number is because we're currently in this budget year utilizing approximately $30 million of the remaining COVID relief funds to be able to continue programming and to meet some essential needs. So after this year, we do not expect to have any more federal COVID relief money available to be able to support current operations, which is definitely something that we need to keep in the back of our mind. In adjusting, and kind of one of the processes of the budget is we take a look at what the BSA might look like if it had been and was adjusted for inflation going back to 2017. And that updated figure that is adjusted for the FY22 CPI is we would need to see approximately $1,268 more dollars to the BSA if it were adjusted for inflation over that period of time. That is also not an insignificant number. And I would also just kind of piggyback on what School Board Member Lessons pointed out is that the district is not allowing some of these fiscal challenges to impede the focus and investment on goals. And that's something personally that I've been very impressed by. There's still a significant investment in making sure that the district is moving forward with implementing the READS Act, that programming related to the district's 3 goals for the reading goal, math goal, and college career life readiness, that those things are preserved in the budget. And I know that that is a goal of the administration moving forward amidst our challenges. And I think that this just goes to say that we really need to see an increase in advocacy at the legislative state level for a BSA increase in order to continue the programming and to continue the investments that we're making that are directly related to instructional goals for educational outcomes for kids in the classrooms. We need to see that increase in investment from the state, especially under the kind of the situation that we're facing that will also be discussed in the joint session related to the state defining outside the cap funding to school districts to support, let's say, after school activities, community services, or pupil transportation, as it were, that those funds are now being defined as local contribution that is against the cap. That will essentially lower the ceiling on the ability of the municipalities to be able to support districts, especially when they fund to the cap. And I think that in order to raise the ceiling on that, we need to also see an increase to the BSA. The one-time funds do that, but we've discussed, I think, ad nauseum, why one-time funding can be problematic in making those long-term financial plans. And that our staff members really need that level of security. We are dealing with similar recruitment and retention issues that are, that have been discussed here earlier. And in order to ensure that our students are given the best, most highly qualified, stable instructional teams, we need to be able to give them that security. So those would be my comments.
Do you have a question?
I was looking at my notes. I think I forgot to write this down last time, but it's around February that the budget gets passed for the 2024 school year?
Correct. Yeah. So before long, we will start into our budget cycle. We'll take a look at what our enrollment is after the student count in and around October, and then start putting together our models to move forward in the budget cycle.
And do you guys have like strategic plan? Guys?
We do. Yeah. Yeah. So the school board has provided, the board goals, as well as direction from the administration for how to kind of move forward with those budget priorities. A lot of that is discussed at the chief's level, so the district administration level, and then the board guides that process from the beginning and provides direction to the administration for finalizing our budget. Yeah.
I just wanted to jump in. If you were to search, and I can put a link for the ASD goals and guardrails, you'll get a really good sense of what those specific goals are. But they do relate directly to reading proficiency, math proficiency, and college career life readiness. And there's some really exciting work coming out. It's really planned to, for the class of 2028 and beyond, we're going to be starting academies at each of the 8 comprehensive high schools to ensure workforce readiness and bring real life opportunities to students, better integrate our business and civic communities into our schools. So lots more of information to come, but we understand that workforce development is a huge area, a huge opportunity, and we want all of our kiddos to have a chance to excel and engage in that work before they graduate.
And then just to add to Ms. Lesson's comments, there's a lot of, for individuals of the committee or of the public who are interested in having more information, there's a lot of information on the district's website. Under the Office of Management and Budget website, we have all of our budget documents, not just the more recent budget documents and information, but some of the archive information as well for previous years. And then, of course, on the school board's website and the superintendent's website, there's information related to the target metrics underneath the goals and the guardrails, and lots of information there. So, yeah.
Yeah, I have looked at the ASD website. It is very nice, user-friendly information, and it does talk about the budget and the strategic priorities really well at a high level. So it's a great resource. Other questions from the group? Anything, Carmela, Brian, Robert? Well, thank you very much. Okay, so I see that we've got a couple of folks from the fire department here. But Courtney, you have your report first, or we could rearrange things to let them go first if there's a time constraint. They've been waiting patiently already.
Yeah.
Would that be?
And I think that really honestly, there's not a lot for the OMB update at this time. As it was discussed, we're working on the 2024 proposed budget. It's not public until October 2nd. It's not finalized for our charter deadline. That's 90 days before the end of the year. So the 120-day memo, I put the link in the chat. So that's the information that's available at this time. And so that's really the update.
Thank you, Courtney.
Yep.
Then, yeah, the next up on our agenda, I see we've got a couple of guests here from the fire department. You guys can, you might be able to find a seat, I think, if we, around the table. But if you'd like to come up and please introduce yourselves, we're excited to hear from you.
Thank you.
We're excited to be here.
Good morning. Well, good afternoon, actually. I'm Doug Schrage. I'm the fire chief and very pleased to be here. I am joined by Assistant Chief Alex Boyd. He is in charge of our administrative operations, and we're delighted to give you a presentation about the fire department's budget and finances. And with that, I'll just turn it over to Wait. One of these, copy?
Sure.
We have enough.
Thank you.
For those of you on screen, I'm just gonna show you, the questions from, what was established previously for department meetings, and then we'll get you a copy of this presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, so we appreciate this opportunity. I know that, our group had talked about, we are always interested in order to meaningfully review the budgets and get into, departmental budgets. Each department has its own budget story to offer. Like to start, police and fire obviously being larger departments, personnel budget wise are ones that make a lot of good sense for us to get started with. And so I'm interested in, the high level territory. I think Courtney's prepped you a bit for what we want, but really excited to have you guys here today. So I hand it over to you. Run with things as you please.
Great, appreciate it. Again, my name is Alex Boyd, Assistant Chief with the Anchorage Fire Department, and my area of responsibility is currently our administration and planning functions. We prepared this presentation based off of some questions that were put forward, and in your handouts, you have one page for each question beyond the title page. So we'll begin with our basic operations, functions, and responsibilities. Anchorage Fire Department is charged with emergency response and mitigation of medical emergencies, fire incidents, hazardous conditions, and technical rescue incidents within the Anchorage Fire Service area, as well as oversight and management of the area-wide EMS delivery. So that's emergency medical service delivery. We are also charged with management mitigation as a deferred jurisdiction from the state of Alaska for codes and ordinance enforcement in the area of fire and life safety. So that's our Fire Prevention Bureau. They also do plan review and ensure that the building codes and life safety codes adopted by the municipality are managed and overseen there. We're currently staffed with 405 members. And this is onto the second page. The operations division represents 98.4% of those folks. Currently, that is 362 people within the department, and those are our emergency response staff. Those are firefighters, apparatus operators, fire captains, senior captains, battalion chiefs. Our fire dispatch center is considered part of our operational function. And our MCT, the response team, the mental health crisis team, our response team there is currently deployed with 2 full-time folks, and we're in the process of finding 2 more. Our administration is about 10.6% of that, with executive staff, fire prevention, support services, and administration making up the balance of those. Those duties of that 10.6% include all of the support, oversight, administrative functions that help our emergency responders make it out the door in every one of their incidents. On to page 3. A quick overview of our budget is listed here. Our final overall budget for 2023 was $112,270,600 and change for the year. We're approximately 63% through the year based on our last budget allocation and reference to budgets to actuals, and we are approximately 58% through that budget. And you'll see in some of those areas, their year-to-date functions, our labor budget is slightly under that 63% 63.5%. Our supplies and services significantly over, and our fixed cost, because it issues quarterly, she's showing a bit under. It'll pop up, but our overall budget, once we adjust into those fixed costs and we hit our third quarter for those functions, they'll run across. The percentages that are noteworthy is our non-labor budget is approximately 5.6% of our budget. The fixed costs represent about 19.1, and fixed costs are things, retirement obligations, as well as past retirement systems, police fire retirement, our debt services, and other elements.
Volunteer fire department.
Volunteer fire department, pay, contract administration, et cetera. And then our labor is the majority of our budget at 75.3%. On this slide and on this handout, you'll also notice some unbudgeted items that are challenging for us this year specifically, and those fall into a vacancy factor, some repairs to a fire engine that was struck on the road, property tax that was not anticipated going in and has not yet been budgeted. And some replacement items, some of the challenges that we face, as well as an IGC for a grant we received for personnel and some other elements. So that is just a very high level flyover on our budget as we roll through.
So a question. So it seems like there'd be a lot of other operating costs like fuel and maintenance of vehicles and things like that. Are those budgeted for separately from this?
That falls within our supplies and services budget, which is the non-labor budget.
Interesting. Yeah, it almost surprises me that those aren't a bigger percent of the overall, but
And we have that detail with, if you want to dive into that a little more deeply.
Yes, there is an attachment on the back that is a deeper supplies and service. We do not unfortunately call out fuel services. We do call out some of the vehicle elements, but some of the costs and budget items are in the attachments on the back with a little bit more detail in each one of those areas. Next in the questions included current initiatives and things that we're moving forward with. Right now, one of the large challenges that we face and initiatives that we established as part of our strategic plan is Community Wildfire Mitigation Program, standing that up. Program attrition and budgetary challenges in the past years have allowed this program to atrophy and required a little bit of rebuild and reimagination. The needs as we move forward, the planning process is undergoing, but we need some support and staffing functions within the department. Found some funding in the form of one-time ARPA funds that were delivered to the tune of about $1 million and $4 million congressional allocation for a wildfire mitigation work within the municipality of Anchorage. So that $5 million in funding is being used currently to stand up the program and move forward. The intent of this is that this will be implemented over, I believe, a 3-year period, a 5-year period, continuing forward with approximately $1 million a year in those costs moving forward for that program. Another one is our mobile crisis team, the MCT, which is part of our mobile integrated health initiative to respond to and help mitigate non-emergent crisis that are not necessarily medical emergencies, but are being called in as emergencies within the city. So this is our medically associated mental health crisis. We tend to have a series of mental health crises and other non-emergent elements that have a mental health central point and key. And these specialized responders go to those emergencies, render aid, and hopefully stabilize folks without bringing them into an emergency medical center or tying up our ambulances for transport to the hospitals or to other areas unless absolutely necessary. One of the challenges we face there and the needs that we see moving forward with that initiative are some stable and consistent funding rules. So a lot of this has been built off of one-time funding or allocations each year, and we'd like to be able to find something more stable in that process. Progress in where we're at with that program is because of some of the challenges we face with the program. We're only about 50% staffed to be able to deploy at the fully desired element. We are in process of hiring 2 additional mental health clinicians to help us come up to the appropriate staffing level and deploy at our objective. The final initiative that we're working forward on is we recently received a fire training division audit that evaluated our training programs, our oversight, and our management of training within the organization. And that audit has called out several things that require additional support and possible funding as we move forward. Some of those include data management as well as staffing levels and implementation of programs. So with that, we are currently held with 1 vacancy in our fire training division and 1 of our fire training specialists. During COVID, a lot of his duties were pulled over into more of a public information role and management of broadcast of the assembly. Our plan is to move that back. We're in the planning process of moving his role back into the organization, utilizing his talents and skills within our training division, as well as reclassifying our vacant fire training specialists and expanding their role to help manage these elements. Currently, we're in the planning process for this initiative as we seek sources for funding and move forward in that initiative, the training division audit. Okay, moving into challenges that we've identified for the near future. Like everyone, I'm sure we're finding a lot of the cost increases and supply chain issues continue to wreak havoc on our non-labor budget. Inflation as high as 200% within emergency services supplies and equipment has persisted. An example of that are fire apparatus. Our fire engines, very complex and expensive pieces of equipment that used to be we used to be able to purchase those for about 700,000, and I believe our newest bid on the engines were really 1.3 million. 1.1 million, excuse me. And our truck companies also increasing costs significantly. Our personal protective equipment, as we went through the pandemic, there were a lot of supply chain issues that led into that, and as a result, the demand has skyrocketed following the pandemic. So cost for personal protective equipment, we used to be able to outfit a firefighter for about $3,000 in equipment. That cost is now in excess of $7,000 per firefighter. And those challenges have come forward, as well as medical supplies. As we all know, medical supplies are in high demand and short supply. So most of the medications that we use have increased in cost significantly. And with that, as we move through continuation budgets, oftentimes we're trying to make the same amount of money stretch a lot further and to try and deliver the same services. We've also deferred a lot of one-time cost items. That's an additional page on the back of the packet here is the final page. We've outlined a few of those one-time purchases that are needed. Everything from computer programs to vehicles and replacement firefighter gear as we see challenges with the cleaning processes and the increase in presence of carcinogens in our gear. Technology has advanced and allowed us to extend the lifespan of our gear with different cleaning processes. However, they're expensive. The trade-off, however, is the elements and programs like that can be done one time quickly and extend the lifespan of our equipment and help bridge the gap to find additional funding. We also have in addition to those one-time elements, our maintenance facility, we've been struggling to stay within the confines of our maintenance facility that was built in 1981. And as the safety and health issues present and forward and technology expands, the complexity of our equipment and the size of our equipment continue to grow, as well as our fleet size, the space that we're in outgrown, and the expense associated with updating and maintaining that facility is becoming prohibitive. So we're trying to find another alternative and option for that.
Let me just, if I can just interject, we've basically outgrown our maintenance facility. The size of our fleet has grown. The equipment's bigger, and we can't expand the building because it's built on the old Merrill Field dump, and we've had core samples dug around there, and it's just trash. And it would be not only very expensive to build there, but we run the risk of if we expose any hazardous materials, then that has to be mitigated and it would just be, it's not something that the municipality is willing to do for good cause.
So that is one of the challenges that, the wicked problem that we're trying to find a solution to as we move forward. Next in our bullet list, there's an evolving mission of the fire and emergency services. As we've all seen in all aspects of our community, there has been an increase of non-emergent needs for our unhoused population, as well as our mentally ill and medically underserved. These are folks who have little access to medical care or for whatever reason have little access to traditional system inputs. And their primary source of care tends to be 911. They'll call an ambulance for minor medical problems that are non-emergent in nature, routinely tying up a lot of our resources, increasing our response volumes and moving forward. So that evolving mission and evolving response expectation of our community is challenging us to ensure that the firefighters are still available for those high acuity and high risk events, as well as the non-emergent challenges that face the community. We're also finding a greater dependency on technology. As technology has evolved and grown, the fire service and the emergency services are leveraging those evolving technologies whenever possible to make our job safer, more efficient, and easier. However, with that dependence on technology, there's a greater acceleration in the advancement. There are new things that are coming out that become mission essential very quickly, and they grow into obsolescence more frequently. A laptop no longer lasts 15 years. You have to replace it every 5. And a lot of our replacement cycles have been based on more traditional timeframes. And that challenge with not only our dispatch, our in-station computers, our apparatus computers, we are seeing a faster and more frequent need to replace those items, and we're struggling to find a means to fund those things. And those were the general high altitude flyovers of the 5 questions that we were asked to present, and the 2 attachments, again, the detailed portion of the budget line that is our current budget to actuals, as they've been broken out into our labor, non-labor general elements, as well as the one-time needs on the back of the packet there. Welcome. Welcome any questions. The opportunity to answer anything you have for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate coming today. Yeah, do we have questions for fire department? Anything? Carmela, Brian, Robert? Yes, please.
Ask, yeah. Do you guys get any like state or federal funding at all to cover operations, or that mostly just like one-time like projects or procurement funding?
Want me to take that?
Sure.
Yes, thanks for the question. We do. We have received actually quite a few grants in recent years. Currently, we have Alex mentioned the $4 million that we got from the federal government, and that was in the form of a grant through the U.S. Forest Service under the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And that's a 4-year, $4 million grant. We're currently operating under a 3-year, $10 million grant called Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response. And that is used to place 18 firefighters on the job for the period of 3 years, funded for 3 years. We, for years, we've been utilizing state grants for community wildfire, they're called community wildfire defense grants. Our Firewise grant just ran out. The Firewise funding from that grant just ran out this last year and hasn't been renewed, but we'll be using the $4 million wildfire grant to replace that funding and continue those programs. What am I missing? What others?
AFG grants for training, development.
Yeah, that's right. We've recently received Fire Act grants for extrication equipment and training. That's the equipment that we use to remove people from vehicles that have been in car crashes. You probably remember the big, heavy hydraulic tools that they use to
Jaws of life.
Yeah, we still use those, but they're actually more powerful and lighter and battery powered now today. And so we can carry more of the equipment. It requires training. We got a grant for that. We have a 2-year Fire Act grant. I think 565,000 or somewhere in that vicinity for firefighter resilience. We injure a lot of firefighters on the job, and so we got a 2-year grant to place a physician and a physical therapist with our department to actually try to treat small injuries before. Right now, if a firefighter gets injured, they have to go home, wait to see an orthopedic specialist, and then they can be prescribed some treatment. What we're doing now is patterned after what major sports teams do. You know, somebody can twist their knee in a play on the football field or a sheet of ice, come out, be treated, and go right back in and play. And that's the goal here. That's a 2-year grant to examine its efficacy. And we've also received in recent years state hazmat grants we receive $10,000 each year from the state for managing our hazmat team. Those are some examples.
That's good. So like, for example, with inflation being the way it has, it for some reason, there's you get to go over your allocated budget. What's the mechanism for covering those costs?
Like if we end up over budget?
Yeah, what's the mechanism for that?
Yeah, well, basically the city makes it up from either fund balance or takes it from other unspent revenue and or unspent funding in other departments. So we're not going to do that this year.
It comes from fund balance, and so that if there isn't a fund balance, then basically it requires additional taxing to cover it. So you either eat into a deficit of fund balance until the next year's taxing comes, and then we make that up.
That's right.
I do recall a few years where there was a surplus in snow removal that was roughly equal to the fire department deficit that kind of worked out nicely, but maybe that wouldn't happen last year, I guess.
Yeah, and I've been on the job 2 years. We've been over budget both years, and I'm not proud of that. But we've you know, in the amount of time I've been here, we've narrowed that down. Right now, we're on track to be on budget or within a couple $1,000.
7,000.
Right now, we're showing a $7,000 overage. We can, we'll make that up between now and the end of the year. One of the challenges for us, there's lots of challenges, but overtime is unpredictable. We've made great strides in managing it. Our overtime due to sick calls is down by 35% since 21. We're taking better advantage of FEMLA. We have reduced vacancy rates. And so that's all in the effort of bringing down that overtime expense to within the budget that we have. The other challenge is that, and the reason we're 60-some% through the year and we've only spent 58% of the budget is because our labor contract with the union specifies that instead of paying the money that people would earn on holidays throughout the year, like if you work a holiday, you get paid overtime, which happens a lot because we're on duty 24/365. That's all saved up and paid at the end of the year, and it's sometimes hard to predict the amount. And it's also hard to predict the amount of leave cash in. So our employees, like other employees, any unused leave down to a certain threshold can cash out unused leave. There have been years when we've canceled leave in order to reduce overtime. That increases the amount that they cash in at the end of the year. And so it's kind of a squishy target. And that's part of the reason that we've had a hard time managing this. But we're getting it dialed in, and we're feeling pretty good about this year.
I'd also like to add that as we have vacancies out on our operational line, we do not have the luxury of leaving those positions unfilled. We have contractual obligation to provide an amount of leave. And when folks are obligated to be able to be off, if we don't have enough staff to fill it, we have the only option is to be able to call overtime or close apparatus, close fire trucks and ambulances. And so vacancy for us when we have a person.
Which we have done.
Yeah,
I will say.
we have in the past. Not an option that we like to exercise, but we can't do it at the cost of service delivery in the field. But our seats, when we fill them with overtime because of leave or obligated felons, end up costing us 300% of a normal day, because we've got the individual in the seat plus they're being paid in that time period with their benefits, and the person who comes in gets time and a half on top of that with additional benefits on top of that. And it comes in at a significant cost when we have vacancy. Another element is, as Chief mentioned, that's keeping us under budget as we're going into the year are the 18 additional positions that are being offset by federal funds. And that's a reimbursement as we go through each quarter. It gets reimbursed to us.
And the challenge with the reimbursement is just that you have to front their pay and then get reimbursed. So that's the challenge.
Yeah, they land in different elements, but it artificially inflates the number of people that we have available for staffing. So our vacancies are actually farther down, and our overtime budget is lower. Elements are lower, and we're landing on what would be our existing budget. It's essentially what we're able to do with these additional staff.
So question I have, I did as part of this group, I did a deep dive into the fire department a few years ago. And it was when Jody Hedrick was chief. And one of the things that she mentioned, and I've been trying to remember the specifics of it, but that fire departments have these kinds of metrics about like how many personnel you need for how many population you serve. And at the time, she said that Anchorage was very low on that we had relatively few fire personnel for our population size. Is that something that you're tracking, that you guys have information on?
There's not a standard for that. I would say we are pretty well resourced for our community. We do have some gaps in coverage. There are some areas in let me back up a little bit. We do have a standard for response time and assemblage of firefighters for fires and medical calls. So for example, we have a standard that specifies that we want to have the first 4 firefighters on scene within 4 minutes of a working structural fire, and 15 firefighters in total on scene within 8 minutes. Did I get that right?
Yes.
And we're able, and our goal is to do that 90% of the time. We don't quite meet that. For some areas of town, we do meet it. But there are some areas, for example, the area in the vicinity of Elmore Road has grown up quite a bit. The population density it's really filled in. We're not meeting the standard there. We're not meeting the standard in the vicinity of Dowling Road and Potter, because those are sort of, equidistant from 3 different fire stations, and none of them are able to satisfy that standard. The Upper Hillside, Potter Valley, places like that, same thing.
Tough.
Setting that aside, though, in terms of the overall strength, I would say we're on par, or maybe even better off than some cities of our size. But we're more concerned with the actual performance, actual meeting the standard of getting people on scene than we are with comparing ourselves to other cities.
Sure. Other questions? Brian, Robert, Carmel? Yeah. Yes.
Sorry. Sorry to take up all the time.
No.
Do you guys see, like, with regards to staffing, is it a lot of people who, I guess the average amount of time somebody spends with Anchorage Fire Department, is that like a long time, or a lot of like 1 to 2 year people who just kind of come up and then go to a different department or some different state?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, that's evolving. So when Alex and I were hired, it was not just common, but that everybody stayed you got hired, you expected to stay for the entirety of your career. People would work 25 or more years. I got hired in 1985. I retired in 2010 and Mayor Bronson hired me back in 21. Nowadays, we're finding a large number of our employees are leaving in the 5 to 7 year range. And I think that's for numerous reasons. One is, I think, it's a changing demographic. Our firefighters, like probably employees in many industries and many vocations, feel freer or motivated to change jobs. It's exacerbated by the fact that fire departments in the Pacific Northwest in particular are actively headhunting our employees. We don't have and this is another factor, we no longer have after 2006, the state moved away from the defined benefit pension program for state or employees enrolled in the state system. And that's coming up on, most of our department is now hired after that. And so their tier 4 benefits become portable after 5 years. And I think that's contributing. And those departments in Tacoma and Bellevue and Bellingham, they know it, and they're actively headhunting our employees. And so we train them up and they get their 5 years on and they move. So what we're doing about that is we're doing our best to only hire in-state people now. We figure that people that are Alaskans already are more vested in the community, more likely to stay here. The problem is there's simply not enough paramedics in Alaska to fill our needs. So we're now paying our employees to go to paramedic school, and it's very expensive, but it's worked out very well. Most of them in the history of the program, we put 19 people through the program since 21, and all but 2 of them have turned out to be very high performing, loyal. We expect long-term employees. Thanks for the question.
One last one I have is about the mobile crisis team. And you mentioned that there's a little bit of uncertainty, like one-time allocations and rather than steady funding. Why has that been like that? I guess I had thought that some of the alcohol tax proceeds would have created a sort of a stable funding base for that program.
I'll take that. Yeah, that's true. So when I came on the job in 21, under Mayor Brownson, the team was in its infancy. It had just gone full time with just one car or one team in service around the clock. Well, not around the clock, but throughout the week. And there is not unanimity in. It's a policy decision about who's best positioned to provide those services and should they even be provided. And so I think as a community, we've struggled with that decision about who really should provide it. For example, it could be us, it could be the police department, it could be nonprofits. And I think as a community, we've continued to struggle with answering that question. So all the while, the team we have has been performing, and every call they go on is a call that we don't take somebody to the hospital almost, or to jail. And whether the program continues to exist or expands or something other is a decision that eventually we'll land on, go from there.
Anything? Well, we hugely appreciate taking the time. I know you guys have a lot of other things to do, a large department to run. So this is very, very helpful. We appreciate it. And also, I personally say thank you for your service. I think our fire department to do a lot of things in our community that sometimes don't get noticed, but putting lives on the line. And so it's a hard job, but very much appreciated. So thank you.
I appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate your time today. It's been an honor to work with you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And please feel free to just ring the doorbell at your neighborhood fire station or my office anytime. The folks there, the men and women of the department will be glad to show you around. Answer any other questions you have.
Excellent, thanks. I know that the service that I guess a lot of new parents know about is where fire vehicles inspect the car seats for you. And I never had to have them do that, but whenever I heard about it being done, they're always really helpful, eager to get in and so it's a really good thing for new parents. So
I appreciate you saying that. Thank you. Thank you.
So then next up on our agenda is that really wraps up our main material. I don't know if there is any audience participation. I don't think we have anyone else, members of the public that are on Teams, and certainly not here in person.
I don't think they're, maybe if you guys want to discuss a little bit about topics for, the next meeting. Obviously, the 2024 proposed budget will have been submitted. So I guess from your guys' perspective, do you just want an update, as part of the OMB update? Or do you guys want to take a little bit more, of the time dedicated to getting some more robust information? The first work session with the assembly is the day after the BAC. So you guys would be getting, probably not all of that because that's a 5-hour work session. But do you guys want to have higher level summary, but more in detail than just like a regular update?
I'm certainly open to listening for opinions, but I feel like warrants a high level warrants a more detailed presentation. I think that would be probably our chance to get a really good grounding in what's in the proposed budget.
Okay.
More than just a regular update.
Okay.
I think. I don't know. Other than Matthew, we think differently.
I'm okay with that. I think, another, I guess, kind of a question I had was what the delivery process on the budget has been in the past. I guess like what level of involvement BAC has in making recommendations or reports or.
There isn't necessarily a requirement of it. It's kind of, you guys kind of talk amongst yourselves of whether or not you want to make some type of a resolution for support, or if there's anything that you guys want to comment on. So it really is kind of the will of the body for the BAC and, what kind of action you guys want to take on it.
There is I think an expectation that's not a written rule that we do some kind of a dive into the budget and that we issue a resolution saying what we think about it. That typically that resolution is we like this budget as it is, and here's kind of a little bit about how we got to it, or but very often we have we would like to see more of this or less of this, or we appreciate the priority here, or we think that this deserves more emphasis. So we typically do that. How we've gotten to that resolution since I've been on here has varied tremendously. Sometimes we've had our own special work sessions outside of these meetings to dig into it. When we have done our department reviews, that we've used that information to factor into our resolutions. So we do have a lot of options for how to do it. I would, my normal inclination would be to have us do a work session. I would like to, I don't want to go through the work session's optional, doesn't necessarily require attendance, but we do, can meet and talk about it. I would say I'm still not overly blown away by our engagement. I know you and I are here in person. The 3 individuals that called in, you guys have not weighed in at all during this meeting. And I do want to see engagement. I think if we're on this body, we need engagement. And so I'm hesitant to call any special meetings if we don't have that kind of participation. So, especially when, a meeting, even like a meeting like today, when we have, the fire chief here, a very busy person, assistant chief, I think that we need to have some engagement. So I'm hesitant to recommend a work session if we don't have a established habit of doing it. So, but I do think that it does take some work to review these budgets. There's a lot to digest.
There's 2 BAC meetings before the assembly acts upon the budget. So you'll have your October meeting and then you'll have the November meeting. So as Nolan said, there has been times when there has been a work session to kind of dive into it a little bit more. Because if you use just the two meetings, you'll have some discussion in October, and then you might have some discussion on the budget again in November, but then you also have to have the discussion on what type of resolution or what type of action you want to take, and it gets to be a lot for just one meeting. You know, especially with the updates from everybody, kind of gets, you know, takes up basically a third of the time, and then, you know, you're kind of left with an hour. So, it really is up to the body though, on how, you know, you guys want to move forward with that. It's something we can discuss in October if you want as well. If there's a forum in October, maybe it's worth having the discussion on whether or not to have a work session, because you still have 4 weeks in between those two meetings to be able to have a work session, so that maybe in November, you guys would be able to take some action on the resolution, so.
Sure. Yeah, and there's also, I think, where you start to see movement on the budget, is when the assembly members start introducing amendments, you know, so that's where you can see like, okay, like there's a direction to where things might move around. And it's nice sometimes if our resolution can reflect some of the, you know, we don't usually get into the specifics of, you know, Zolotel's amendment to do this, but more like you can see a direction, like an emphasis on people wanting to put more budget into this or less from this. And so you can kind of take that into consideration crafting a resolution so that it's kind of timely and we're weighing in on conversations that are taking place about where money can. So sometimes in the past, we've been able to time it right so that we can respond to some of those things, but not always. It's always tricky, the timing of a monthly meeting and then the way the work sessions are happening. So it's hard to get the timing exactly right so that our you know, footprint on things is timely.
Yeah, I think that for November, it might actually intersect. So I believe right now they have their work session scheduled for November 9th for their amendments, and that is the BAC meeting date. So
I think Meg said the 17th was the budget amendments meeting. Work session.
unless they've changed it, because originally it was scheduled for the 9th, and I haven't seen anything come through. So maybe it is worth waiting until next month's meeting to decide whether or not you want to schedule a work session and how you want to.
You're still able to do like a detailed budget review and kind of take that and decide if you want to do a work session. If you do that at that October meeting. Detailed budget.
Yeah, I think that's what I would think. Yeah, it would be, Courtney giving us the detailed overview, right? Yeah, and we can decide after that. Yeah, that would be good. Yeah, because that'll help us figure out that overview. Will help us figure out like, is there something specific we want to dig into?
Yeah, that. Perfect.
Yeah, exactly. So, anything else? The other? Yeah, I think as far as the next topics, I think we're probably the next couple months are going to be that. So we can then, after this budget cycle, we can dig into some of our other topics like electric vehicle impacts or some of those other things that the group is interested in.
Yeah, and I can put the department meetings down there too as well. So maybe that's another thing you can pick up like in December, is getting back maybe into discussing if you want to keep these kind of individual meetings, or if you guys want to do some type of a hybrid of having individual departments assigned, but having certain departments come in maybe, or, you know, how you want to work that.
Sure.
Okay, all right.
Okay, well, I guess we don't need a motion to adjourn, but yeah, appreciate everyone's time. So thanks for participating. Thanks for coming in person, Matthew.
Yeah, absolutely.